So I'm a second generation survivor, and I think what I'm doing here is making an observation. I don't actually have a message for you. I think that's part of my problem. But I do have an observation of what it is to be a second generation survivor. I'm sure many of you have been on a group excursion, a group trip to Israel or anywhere else in the world, and been on a coach, and you're getting to somewhere important. You're nearly there, and suddenly the atmosphere on the bus changes. As an educator, I always knew I'd done a good job in terms of the preparation work if, when you're 20 minutes from Masada or Yad Vashem or the Kotel, I could announce, we're nearly there, and a certain quietness would come over the bus. And I had the experience myself a number of times, but especially when I was in Poland, when I was 20 minutes from Auschwitz. And that feeling, that quietness, that loneliness of looking out the window, what am I going to see? What am I going to feel? Why am I here? What does this mean to me? I think I want to say that Jews, and as Jews, we are in a state, maybe a constant state, of 20 minutes from Auschwitz. My father is a survivor of a Nazi concentration camp, and that makes me a second generation survivor, although I'm not sure what I survived. My father used to joke that it was him. My father, Paul Oppenheimer, Zichron Livracha, was born in Berlin. He was picked up by the Nazis with his family in Amsterdam. They were taken to Westerberg and then to Bergen-Belsen. His 4 grandparents were taken to Sobibor and murdered there. My father's parents died in Bergen-Belsen, died of starvation. They died not knowing if their children would survive. But they did. It's Paul, his brother Rudy, and his sister Eve. And in 1945, after the end of the war, they went to London and joined their uncle there, and they built lives for themselves. This is the bare facts, the history, of which I could tell you so much more. But it's not the history that really fascinates me. It's the memory I have of the Holocaust. At Pesach, we're asked to tell the story of the Exodus as if we had been redeemed from Egypt. Because only then, when we tell the story in the first person, do we understand what it means to be redeemed from Egypt, what freedom really means. It's a really powerful educational tool. Tell a story, create a memory, and that informs our identity and our lives. History, or the historical research of the Holocaust, is critical for humanity. Memory of the Holocaust is critical for the survival of the Jewish people. And here's a funny phenomenon that happened with me and memory. I'm 26 years old and I'm living in Israel now, and my parents come and visit me. And we start talking about Kibbutz Yehel. It's a kibbutz in the south of Israel. And my father starts talking about when he visited Kibbutz Yehel. I say to Dad, Dad, you've never been to Kibbutz Yehel. He swears blind, I've been. I'm like, no, you haven't. And I was right, he really had never been there. What had happened was when I was 18, I was on Kibbutz Yehel for 6 months. And in those days, you used to write letters home. So I wrote a letter home to my parents every single week. And because it's a gap year program, there isn't a whole lot of things to tell my parents about the experience I was having. So I ended up going on about the detail, the people, the location, the work. And because my dad missed me, I imagine he read those letters a lot. And he thought about me in really vivid terms, about what I was doing out there, to the point where he actually had, or created for himself, a memory of a place he'd never been. This is me and my dad when I was about 3 or 4 years old. We're on holiday and I'm inspecting his hands. He has a flat nail. and I'm looking at it. And what I think I'm thinking at that moment is really interesting. Because what I think I'm thinking at that moment is, my dad has a flat nail because of what happened to him in the war. And when I get to about 7 or 8, my dad has a flat nail because the Nazis tortured him. But it's not true. I didn't know anything about this story. I made it up. There was silence in my house. And I think it's really interesting that silence might be one of the most powerful storytellers in the narration of the Holocaust. The silence of your own past, when you realize your family's not like other families. There are missing generations. I don't know what my great-grandfather's name was. I don't know what my grandfather's occupation was. Nobody ever talked about my grandmother's cooking. My dad didn't talk about being a child or going to school. Or the silence of sneaking around the house. And this time I'm not looking for the big bar of chocolate that my dad brought back from a business trip to Germany. I'm looking for that other thing he brought back many years before I was born. The silence is pervasive, and yet around it, through the clues from it, I built a story and a memory for myself. I love my dad unconditionally and totally. And because something so massive had happened to him, I had to understand it. I had to build that story for myself. My dad's silence was broken completely in 1990. In 1990, he got an MBE for his services to the motor industry. And I think it was January the 1st. A local journalist from Solihull rang up and asked him a couple of questions. Well, hello, Mr. Oppenheimer. Congratulations. Can I ask how old you are? And my dad says in his perfect British accent, I'm 61. And the next question, and where were you born? Berlin. Pause. So where were you during the war? A few days later, this is the headline in the local newspaper. In 3 simple questions, the journalist had got my dad talking about the Holocaust. And for the next 17 years, my dad pretty much didn't stop talking about the Holocaust. He gave over 850 lectures and talks. Some years he spoke maybe 2 or 3 times a week. He probably reached over 40,000 people during those years. I think his message, when I've listened to his talks, seemed to be about don't be a bystander. But I'm finding it really difficult to find a message in the Holocaust. I read many years ago that while survivors will have a lifetime of dealing with a personal memory, second-generation survivors try and deal with the totality of the Holocaust. Do I have a message? There are loads of things in my life that we might say have some imprint from the Holocaust. I went to live in Israel. I work in social justice. I work in the Jewish community and Jewish education. I have 4 children, not 2 children. But can I stand here today and say, this is what the Holocaust means? Well, I can't, because I'm stuck. This is a poem written by Chaim Maor. He's an Israeli artist and also a second-generation survivor. It's 42 words, but it's a story, right? There seems to be a beginning, there seems to be an end. It seems to tell us a full story, and yet it is just words, mundane words that we've redefined with a story. It speaks a lot to me because it's not really a historical account, and yet we all know what so many of those words mean, and they conjure up images for us. It tells us a story, but I'm not sure it leaves us with any meaning. And that's what I mean. I'm standing here and I don't really have a meaning for you because I'm stuck 20 minutes from Auschwitz.